Today we get to read about the birth of Jesus, and there are a couple interesting things that I want to point out, and then I'm going to share with you what God said to me through this. But before that, I want to give a quick recap. So, Joseph and Mary, they're in Nazareth, and there's a census being taken, so Rome wants to keep track of how many citizens they have for tax purposes. So Mary and Joseph, they head back to Bethlehem, which means that Joseph probably owned property over in Bethlehem, which is why they needed to go back there. That's how they determine your hometown, is where did you own property, not where you lived. So they find out Mary's pregnant, and this is a big no-no in that culture, and Joseph's going to divorce her. We don't see that in Luke, but we see that over in Matthew. So Joseph is going to quietly divorce her because that's the proper thing to do if she gets pregnant by someone else. And he assumes she gets pregnant by someone else because he didn't do it. So he's going to divorce her, and then an angel comes and assures them. And this is all in Matthew. In Luke, we just see them going to Bethlehem, and Mary goes with them. Now this is interesting. This is the first thing I want to point out. There's a truck over here. Let's let the truck pass. So Mary goes with him. Now, she didn't have to go with him unless she owned land in Bethlehem, which it's very unlikely that she owned land. So she probably went with Joseph because her social circle in Nazareth had shunned her because she was pregnant and not married. They were only betrothed, which is kind of like an engagement. It's a little more serious than an engagement, except you're not supposed to have sex. So Mary goes with him because she's being shunned by her friends. Friends are no longer hanging out with her. It's really rough, so she goes with Joseph to Bethlehem for the census. The second thing I want to point out is that common translation says that there was no place in the inn for them, so they stayed in the stable. Now we get this picture of them being rejected by everyone and then having to go and stay with the animals because there's no place for them. That's probably not how it played out. Now, she had experienced rejection, so it's not that she hadn't been rejected for being pregnant, but more than likely there was no room in the house because of all the people who had to come back for the census. So instead they stayed with the animals, because even if they had fit them in the house, their inns were very uncommon. The idea of a hotel or some place that visitors could stay is very uncommon. So they would have stayed with family, but there was no room because everyone was back for the census. So imagine, they could have fit her, but imagine her giving birth in a house full of people. So instead they go out to the animals, which is where there's more warmth. And this would have either been in like a cave where the animals were kept. There's a good tradition for that. Or it would have been in the outside room of the house. So houses were built like concentric circles. You had, and on the outside circle, the room on the outside of the house was where the animals would be kept in order to keep the house warm, because animals have a bunch of warmth. That's kind of what bodies do. They produce warmth. So either Jesus was born in a cave or was born in the outside room of the house. Jesus taught me actually has almost nothing to do with that. I realized this today as I was reading this passage and God was talking to me through it. I have been trying to do things on my own. I've been trying to see what I can accomplish on my own. I joked with myself this morning as I was talking to myself, as weird people like myself do. I said, if anything, I voted myself most likely to succeed out of high school, or at least out of college. I believed I was going to do some pretty amazing things, and I still have this really high expectation for me. So I keep trying to accomplish things on my own because I think that I have that ability, that I should be able to do amazing things on my own. And yet, Mary and Joseph, the greatest thing that they did had absolutely nothing to do with them. They gave birth to the Son of God, and that was due in no part to themselves. And God used this to remind me that, hey, the greatest thing I'm going to do in my life, just like with Mary, is not going to be because of my own strength and my own power. It's going to be because of something that God does. So I want to encourage you to not rely on Jesus, and to not rely on yourself, but instead to rely on Jesus. to do something under the power of Jesus, to allow the Holy Spirit to do something amazing through you, rather than rely on your own strength. Now, God's going to use your gifts, but we have to rely on God's strength. We cannot rely on our own strength. We can't decide, I'm going to do this on my own in order to prove something. Instead, there is something more important than proving ourselves. It's being used by God to change others. So I want to encourage you to allow God to do something amazing through you today for the sake of others. As Christians, we're supposed to live for the sake of others, to live sacrificial lives for the sake of others. So allow God to do that in you today.